Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel, and today I am joined by my co-host who likes to get his arm stuck in every part of my body. This is Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Together, the new horror movie from Neon from Michael Shanks. You got Allison, Brie, you got Dave Franco. Whoa, how did he do that? His body must be fused together.
That's
God.
right.
But we're here to talk about this film that is a crazy body horror adventure and give our thoughts. Of course, if you have seen Together, you can leave your thoughts in the comment section. You can join our Discord to talk to us directly about the film. But, of course, just to give us a little treat for doing such hard work, we're such good boys, you can
Thank you.
subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. That would definitely
Yeah.
help out.
Uh-huh. It is a digital scratching of our metaphorical bellies.
Yes, absolutely. And every time someone subscribes, go,
Yeah, I roll around on the floor like this.
Tanner, we have both
Yes.
seen Together, a movie that,
Yes.
from its very premise, I was like, all right, that's compelling.
Mm.
And then I watched it, and frankly, it was compelling. But what do you think about the movie?
Tucker, I think this is a very good movie. I think this is a good time. I obviously knew that just from the title and the marketing and things like that, I knew that roughly what the premise of the film would be.
Yep.
And the metaphor therein,
Yep.
especially casting actual real life married couple Dave Franco and Allison Brie. And I think it lives up to a lot of the expectations that one might have for this. It obviously does have some pretty gnarly body horror stuff in it, as we will talk about. But we'll probably talk about even more like the relationship stuff that this movie is sort of employing. I think that is really the bread and butter of what the film Together is.
Yeah.
Because the body horror stuff can be, if you're a real like sicko horror head, kind of relatively light for most of the film
Yeah,
because
true.
it's really spending time on the relationship and the how it has sort of stagnated between
Hmm.
these two characters and how it is being tested by this crazy thing that is going on. But ultimately, is it strengthened? Are they healthy together? Are they less healthy together? Like, there's all sorts of questions being raised that I think the film is really interested in.
Yeah, yeah. I thought this was a really, really remarkable movie. I think it's some of the best digital and practical effects that I've seen, just period, in terms of body horror. I thought it was really, really
Hmm.
impressive from that angle. I think that this is something that most movies fail with, especially horror movies. But when you start to learn more about what is causing this to happen and this sort of backstory, lore, world building of a
Hmm.
cult and of a history of this event phenomenon occurring to
Things
people.
supernatural,
Yeah,
yeah.
I found it really, really compelling. I thought it was well conveyed. And this movie is just also so tight. It's so focused. It is a slow burn, as you mentioned,
Hmm.
until really crazy shit doesn't happen until about 35
That's
minutes before the end of the movie.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like the last third. But I do think that it's still very compelling up to that point because it is just a decent relationship drama. And I think the leads have great chemistry and portray a unique couple. And then shit goes off the rails. And it's
And
also
then shit
super
goes off the
focused
rails.
because there's ostensibly only like three relevant actors in this movie. Like
True.
super,
Hmm.
super tight cast. And I think it's just well balanced. Every performance is good. The practical effects are good. The themes are
Uh-huh.
very interesting and unique, and the concept is unique. Like this is something where someone pitches this to you.
Well,
What? Okay.
well,
What?
there's a whole discourse about this, Tucker. I
Okay.
don't know. You probably
What's the
haven't
movie
heard
ripping
this.
off then?
Some guy said like, I have a script that has this
Oh,
exact same premise or
yeah. It
whatever.
doesn't
It's
really.
one of those
Okay.
situations. And yeah, yeah. Well, we can maybe talk
Sorry,
about it a little
sorry,
bit further
guy. I
into it.
haven't seen your movie
Yeah.
yet.
Exactly, exactly. But also, I think this script, I think it came out that this script was written before that guy's script, actually. I don't
Mm.
know. It's weird. It's a weird situation, but I think it's just a little bit of parallel thought going on here because the idea of it actually isn't that crazy. Like, if you, like, I think.
Yeah.
Because if
This
you
would happen
really
to me, and I would be fine.
exactly. Well, there's a little bit of like, what would you do situations, questions that can be asked kind of at the end of this movie, which I think are pretty fun too. But ultimately, like the metaphor and translating that into a body horror premise is pretty kind of straightforward. It's easy to grasp, and I think that'll
Yeah.
kind of benefit this movie as it is in theaters right now, and then eventually goes to streaming at some point in a couple of months. Like I think it is easy for general
Yeah.
audiences to wrap their head around
It's not
because,
heady.
as you mentioned,
It's
yeah,
not not
it's
like,
not super
I
heady.
don't understand really what's going on here. This is not fully
Uh-huh.
explored. There's not a ton of subtext in this movie, and I don't necessarily mean that in a
No.
negative way. It's like
Yeah.
it's got its topic and its theme, and everything is building towards that.
Exactly. It is a very intertwined idea, ironically, actually. So let's get into that idea. So we're introduced at the very beginning of this film to a couple who has been dating and they are not yet engaged, and that is a bit of a point of
Yeah.
contention or like soft contention between them. Is that they seem to be operating in some sort of rut, but now they have to move out of the city and go into the basically the countryside for Allison Brie to take this teaching job.
Yeah.
Dave Franco is a sort of floundering slash somewhat successful musician who's sort of down on his luck a little bit in his musical career. And he is not crazy about this idea about going out into the countryside because it'll be farther away. He'll have to give up his dream. But ultimately, is he pursuing that dream at the current moment? Like that whole idea of like he feels betrayed or like he's having to shut down his life for his partner, but like is that really the case, or is he just using that as an excuse for why he's not being successful right now?
Hmm.
Like that is an idea that is all tied up in the conflict that really like comes to a boiling point fairly early on in this film. I also love the super awkward like proposal scene that's at the beginning of this.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's rough.
the theater I saw it in was a smaller theater, so it was pretty full.
Yeah, so is mine. Yeah.
And everyone was just like, oh
Oh
no,
man.
no, 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 no. Yeah,
Because
it was a really fun
what
just
really
experience
sells
at
that
the top of
scene
this.
is the
Yeah.
insert shots of the background characters who are all
Yes,
just
yes.
oh, like
Yeah.
that. God.
It's just that's really good. And the
Yeah.
movie's also quite funny,
Yeah,
I think.
surprisingly so.
That's something that we should
Hmm.
mention as well. So yeah, that's the setup of this relationship, and then of course, couple going out to a house in the woods, kind of creepy stuff going on here.
Hmm.
You're also immediately sold on Brie and Franco and their dynamic as being like, yes, these characters love each other, but also they introduce these ideas of like, are they just comfortable with one another? Is that
Yeah.
the thing?
That's a really fascinating theme, especially for a horror movie to
Hmm.
explore. I would more likely feel like I would see this kind of theme of like complacency in a relationship in like a drama from A24 or from a not or even like a drama comedy. You get a lot of
Yeah.
these movies that are about like awkward relationships that don't lean into anything genre.
Mm.
But this movie does, and I think it makes it feel very distinct for a horror movie, because the idea of exploring the complexity of human romance and human relationships, and where it doesn't always go right, even despite everyone's best interests, it's very difficult to fully express yourself, even to someone who you care about a lot, who you've known for a very long time. There can be these barriers and regrets and grudges that are built up over the
Hmm.
course of years, and so that tension, I think, is what makes the first 2/3 of this movie still very, very engaging. Is this isn't
Yeah.
a kind of relationship dynamic you see very often in films, especially not in horror films. I think the two leads portray it very well, especially as it starts to take a more serious hold on their lives and their conversations. Once they've moved out and they don't have any friends to distract them, they're not in the city, they can't leave to just like go do their own thing. They're trapped in this house together. Dave Franco doesn't have a driver's license,
Hmm.
and so the fact that the two of them still need each other, because ultimately this movie is about codependency as well, and
Yes.
how dangerous it can be to not be fully realized as your own person, or fully if you don't fully understand yourself before being
Hmm.
in a relationship, that the ways that you need to support each other and like take elements of your partner for granted and things like that can become really deep-seated issues,
Hmm.
because understanding yourself and being self-actualized is very important before committing to a relationship, and that's what this movie
Absolutely.
explores.
Exactly, and it's also playing with this idea of like, if you're not, if you, if who is actually self-actualized in the relationship, who needs who more, who is
Mm-hmm.
codependent on the other person more.
Yeah.
And that plays directly into some of the supernatural premise. So we'll put a pin in that and sort of get
Oh,
into how
oh, I just ate
you
the
know
pin. Sorry.
the wait. Tucker, no, but now it's on the floor.
No, I ate it.
You ate the
Oh.
pin, but the point is on
Oh,
the
the
floor.
point
It's
is on the
falling.
floor.
Yeah,
That's fine.
yeah,
You'll find it.
exactly. Okay. So hey, they go walking in the woods. They go for a little hike. They're a city couple, and they're like, oh, we can go on a hike, but they get caught in the rain, bump them. So then they fall through the ground, and then they have this really crazy looking cave that there's a bell in, and there's
Yeah.
like pews like built into the wall or whatever like that. And there's some water down there for sure. Just definitely drink that water. That's totally fine. And Tucker, wouldn't you know it, that's like cursed magic water that sort
Yeah.
of makes them start sticking together.
That's so true. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
that imagery of the
Uh-huh.
buried chapel and this crazy fucking alien hole, and by which I mean it reminds me of like the ships from Alien.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep, yep.
Is the imagery that really sold me on this movie, and actually that's the first thing you see in the film because there's this opening scene of
Oh yeah, the dogs. Yeah.
a pair of dogs finding this hole, drinking the water, and then getting stuck
Mhm.
together. And when I saw how great the like practical effect of this cave is, with this
Mhm.
bell hanging down in the hole and the faces and the walls and things, I'm like, all right, this movie is something really, really special. I find that imagery so striking, and especially once our characters find their way into it, and it starts to sort of swallow them up, and they're trying to have this conversation, but it's this really awkward position of them being trapped in a
Mhm.
cave. And then the movie plays with that in a really cool sequence in which Dave Franco's like psychosis is like he's having a dream, and like his breathing is matching the breathing of the walls, and these faces are like
Mhm.
looking at him, and they've got this cool like wind effect where it's like gusting his hair and some leaves as he's breathing. It's like
Uh-huh. Yeah,
what is
yeah,
going
yeah.
on? Like this is like some really interesting, not particularly terrifying necessarily. It's not jump scares, but really
Mhm.
unsettling, dark, and really distinct imagery that I thought was like really, really, really compelling.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So they eventually get out, and then there is a lot of like toying with the idea of them like sticking together.
Yeah.
There is some like light, uncomfortable body horror stuff going on, like the massage sequence when like this Allison Brie's skin is like really mushy and malleable, like just like a tick past like what actual human skin and like body parts look like. It was like this has got to be like a dummy or something like that they're
Yeah.
doing this with because it's like just crossing into that threshold of like the uncanny valley. And there's lots of stuff
That's
like
where they
that,
moved.
including a what's that?
That's where they moved. It's a small
Yeah,
town
oh,
called
the
Uncanny
uncanny
Valley.
valley. Okay, very
Is there
good,
a movie
very
called
good.
that? Like a small town horror movie called The
Mm,
Uncanny Valley? Oh, that's
there's gotta be, right? At this point, there's gotta be.
Jason Blum. Hello.
Exactly. Um,
It's
and
not a
then yeah, so
franchise. It's not franchisable, so he wouldn't be interested.
So yeah, there's just lots of stuff. I mean, like, what are some of the moments where they're like, where Dave Franco's just like, there's something weird going on here. I mean, there's the moment when Allison Brie drives away and he like passes out and is like sliding along the shower wall, like following her as she's driving along, basically, which is pretty interesting and ties back into the idea of like he needs her a lot more than she needs him, kind of thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's literalizing that sort of aspect of their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's also a moment when she wakes up in the middle of the night and is like, "Oh, you're on my hair," and then the hair's like
Oh yeah,
deep down his throat. He's like,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
really
We
crazy
have
effect there.
pulls feet and feet of hair out of his mouth or whatever. That's
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
crazy.
yeah. That's
Oh
fucking
yep.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. In terms of another moment of imagery early on that, again, I think sets this movie kind of up in my mind over many other horror movies is this image of it's like the transition between when they're in the city and when they've moved to the house
Hmm.
in Uncanny Valley, as we'll call it, um,
Hmm.
where Allison Brie is having this dream about his dead parents.
Oh
And there's
yeah.
this image where, or no, I guess it's him,
It's
where,
he has the
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
he like sits up and he sees on the other end of like a really long bed this
It's
terrifying
like
old
Charlie and the
couple.
Chocolate Factory, like a
Yeah, yeah,
double
yeah.
bed
It
situation.
is, it is, but it's also like super long. Get this
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
like bird's eye shot. Really like terrifying makeup on these old people at the end
Hmm.
of the bed. And I'm like, that's just great practical imagery.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
also just want to say before we get more into the movie's themes and then further body horror, I think this movie looks phenomenal. I think that
sure.
the lighting, the great use of soft depth of field.
Hmm.
I think the sets are really great. I especially, as I mentioned, I like that cave, but then these bells that are everywhere.
Hmm.
It's a very richly colored movie. It feels like a Neon or A24, just like really quality production. And then also it's fucked up body horror shit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and the hallucinations, the dreams that he has about his parents ties into a sort of tragic backstory for him. But
Yeah,
also it metaphorically is the thing of like
the monster
becoming
is trauma,
attached.
really.
Yeah, exactly. Becoming attached to something dead, which is a thing that becomes, again,
Oh,
like many
sure. Yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
literalized at a later point in the film that we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I mean, should we talk about should we just fast forward a little bit into when like they're like, okay, all right, shit's actually going down. We're actually getting stuck together. I believe you,
Well,
obviously.
yeah, because the movie spends a lot of its middle chunk doing less body horror and more about this self actualization and the
Mhm.
difficulty, particularly of uh, getting out of a long-standing relationship that's not working. And again, that's where I felt myself very compelled by this movie outside of its uh, genre premise. Is these conversations that are having feel very real. They feel
Yeah.
awkward. They feel tense and uncomfortable. And only because these conversations aren't impacted as much by the body horror element of it. It's just because it's good writing and it's relatable in some way, and it's emotionally compelling. As you were mentioning earlier, the idea of like, what would you do in this situation? I
Mhm.
mean, when I was watching, my mind was racing of like, how do you handle this kind of conversation, especially when you're in a scenario that very much parallels what most horror movies do, where you separate your
Mhm.
characters out into a situation they're uncomfortable with. They're mostly cut off communication wise. They don't have internet.
Yes.
His phone is gone or whatever. You know, it is
Mhm.
lost in the shuffle. That is interesting from a horror premise because like, okay, they can't just like call 911 or whatever. Or Google, why is this happening to me?
Right.
But also it's compelling from a dramatic standpoint because they're very isolated, and they don't have friends to go and talk to. They don't have their usual places that they're used to
Mhm.
being, and so tension is just heightened in that way as well. And so I found that the drama and the horror both converged on this one thing of them like being isolated in this house that they're not familiar with.
Mhm.
That's a really cool way to synergize those things, and also again lean into a horror trope where city people move into house
Yeah.
that are not
Of
comfortable
course.
with, but it worked
Yeah.
very well in this one.
Yeah, and there are just other cool horror imagery things that like I want to bring up that often are centered around these conversations where because they are more isolated, they are on their own, they're forced to confront their relationship because they can't be distracted by the city or their
Yeah, yeah,
friends or,
sure,
or their
exactly.
careers or things like that. Allison Brie misinterprets these conversations that Dave Franco is like trying to have with her about what is happening as like he is being clingy. He's like, I can't be without you. I can't, like, you need to be
Yeah,
near me at all the time. Otherwise, I feel sick. I feel disoriented. All this stuff that is like actually the supernatural premise, but in fact, she is misinterpreting as like, all right, what is this guy's deal? Like, he's acting really strangely. Like, he's trying to maybe like distract me from my career because he is distracted from his right now and all this stuff. Until eventually there is the scene where they are sort of backflipping slash sliding down the hallway towards one another, and their arms start to fuse together. And I think another moment, the other cool thing about this screenplay, is that the practicality of like how do you get out of this, like practical real world solutions to crazy supernatural problems, like
yeah,
the thing that I keep relying on, the muscle relaxers that Dave Franco is prescribed at earlier points in the movie, help them to like separate. Basically, they are able to
yeah,
relax their muscles. I just love that. I just love that idea that like yes, this is a crazy supernatural like this is impossible, but on an anatomical level, they can also solve it
Sure.
with practical real world means.
Yeah, and of course, uh, yeah, the magnetic force of this
Yeah.
movie is really what it creates some of the most interesting moments of like choreography and imagery.
Hmm.
Is the idea that this supernatural force is like literally pulling them together. They start to uh, they start to like lose consciousness when they're too far apart from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they are then too close together, the magnetic force starts like working on them, and like they can't stop it. Like
Hmm.
instead of being dragged by a monster, they're being dragged by nothing. And but they still
Yeah.
have this same kind of like genuinely very terrified reaction to I cannot control my body,
Yeah, look,
and
I love the
I'm
moments
being
whenever
moved down the hall or whatever.
I love the moments whenever they try to stop themselves on something, like something low to the ground, like they'll put their feet against it, and then they just like flip over the thing like,
Yeah,
by their feet. Yeah,
and the practical
it's
effect
just
is
cool stuff.
so good. And
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
definitely got some like Allison Brie stand-in contortionist MFs that are doing some
absolutely, yes.
crazy body stuff.
Uh-huh. But then we get the moment that I think is kind of like the button to a lot of the trailers for this movie, where they're
Sure.
like in the kitchen, and the thing is like just out of frame. It's like, okay, what's going on exactly with their bodies here? And it's the handsaw sort of sequence where they are like, okay, we're gonna have to like cut each other apart here. And that's it, like it's really heightened. The effect is great, and also it's quite funny because that's where Alison Brie says like, "I believe you now," obviously. And like you get this thing of like she tries to get him drunk to numb the pain, and it's like, uh-oh, like we are like symbiotically combined now. So you getting drunk also makes me drunk. That like that's a cool little moment in there. And there's also just like the hard cut that they do to them like sitting at
Yeah,
opposite sides
yeah,
of the
it's good.
kitchen, like
That got
eating
laughs.
breakfast or whatever.
That got
Yeah.
laughs. Yeah,
That
they're
like
like
that is the
eating
sense of
chicken.
humor that this movie has. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that this movie does end up having some levity to these terrifying moments, especially through the lines of dialogue, especially with Dave Franco, where it's like these not so educated but not in the same way city folk who don't
Hmm.
they're like trying to use what
Yes,
knowledge they
I mean,
have.
I love the moment where they're sitting at the table and he's like, it wasn't like mildew or whatever that made us stick together in the cave. He's like, I thought you said it was mildew. He's like, since when do I know anything about mildew? I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and the idea of them like they get lost. Right, he takes out his phone. He's like, "All right, that's north." And like, what
What
do
do
we
we
do
do
with
with
that?
that?
Yeah, and I'm like, these moments feel believable. Of like, all
Yeah,
right, your
yeah.
mind's trying to fill in what is the solution here, what is the issue here, and
Uh-huh.
genuinely trying your best. Like, all right, well, something kind of sticky and gross, like mildew, like that. That
Sure.
seems to work. And then like
Uh-huh.
being like honest enough to be like, I have no idea.
I
Because
don't know.
in a lot of these situations, especially like survival situations or horror
Hmm.
situations, like we've general people have never
Hmm.
dealt with any of this, and so you're gonna try your best, but you don't know what's happening.
No.
And so I think that's another reason why these characters feel so believable, so well
Hmm.
realized, is they are imperfect characters in believable ways, not cartoonish or like simplistic ways. They are believable in that they're very flawed and don't want to admit it, and then are forced to admit it in certain sequences.
Yeah, yeah. Should we do a little performance thing before we get into like the third act final reveals of this
Sure.
thing? We could talk about. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say outside of like the fact that Brie and Dave Franco are very good. I did just want to mention that like from the first few Dave Franco line deliveries, I was like, okay, I have to shift into what Dave Franco is like on screen because obviously like I recognize him from like comedies from like 10, 15 years ago is kind of where he broke out, and he's still operating in that kind of like I don't want to say boyish but kind of like
Yeah, no,
that,
definitely.
and
I
like
think that's true.
like height like really heightened and anxious sort of line delivery that
Yeah.
he has. And so I'm like, oh yeah, this is what Dave Franco is like on screen. And then Allison Brie is often she's operating in a sort of different realm than what I think most people are familiar with her in. She often plays like a softer, more quaint kind of character, and that is what she could be at the beginning of this film. But like when
Yeah.
she does the heel turn into like, hey man, you're being really weird right now, and I think we need to take a break.
Yeah.
And she's trying to take like assert herself in the situation. Like she's very good at that, and that's not necessarily something you see Alison Brie do in TV or movies a whole lot. She's
Yeah.
not exactly an assertive character, which I think feeds into what makes that turn in the film feel pretty compelling because she's able to pull that off.
Yeah, it's a great combination of uh, lots of subtle performance, like eye performance of them like
Hmm.
reacting to something and not saying anything about it, but still like you can see the gears turning in their head as they're processing what's happening. Lots of good silent performance in that way. And then it's just the performance and also the scripting of these characters where they're both likable, but they're also both just unlikable enough to where you understand that this isn't exactly working for the two of them,
Well,
and,
yeah.
and, and that their personalities clash in these ways that you could get over, but that you
Hmm.
would harbor some grudges against. I especially
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
in the opening scene of the movie where we get introduced to the two of them. The moment where she's like, "Oh my," he's like, come over here," like, "Oh my gosh, oh we're matching," and he's
Mm,
like, you can see his mental process. He doesn't say anything of
mm.
he wants to be known as something other than this person's partner,
Yeah,
and
I
he
mean, there's
he
there's
wants to
also
have his
the
own
like some
identity because she's
yeah, there's some
very
lines
she's very heavy-handed.
there are lines to that effect where one of his Allison Brie's brother is like
Yeah,
at the beginning of the movie. He's like, I thought when you started dating my sister that you'd make her cooler.
yeah,
Like you kind of get that backfill of like he was like a cool, edgy, like underground musician guy, and then he settled down with a school teacher and got kind of lame, and he kind of resents that fact that other people see that and that he kind of feels that too.
yeah.
Um,
And she has the opposite where it's because he is more of a, I don't know, free spirit or whatever. Like
mhm.
he's not as settled or as mature,
Yeah.
frankly, in terms of like what we usually see traditional mature roles as having a steady job,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. Obviously having a car, being able to take care more of yourself.
Mhm.
She thinks that maybe he's holding her back,
Yeah.
and that he isn't doing enough for their relationship, not only in terms of like just general maturity and support, but also sexually. They have this thing that ties into what you were mentioning earlier of the dead parents. Of
Mhm.
he found his parents dead, and
Mhm.
the trauma of that situation, which you can imagine would be a very traumatic situation,
Mhm.
um, beautifully described in this sequence in which he's talking about the smell and the way that he found them and that he never told anyone about this. I thought it was an
Mhm.
amazing scene, where that would cause a lot of internal baggage for you to feel uncomfortable wanting to be intimate with someone, because that's really what this movie is about, is how difficult intimacy can be, and how it's difficult to balance desire and intimacy and also maintaining your own identity. These
Mhm.
conversations are really thoroughly explored in this movie. I think in a lot of movies that posit one thing as the theme of the movie and also as the monster of the movie. We often on our
Mhm.
reviews have this, oh, the monster is grief, the monster is depression.
Mhm.
Like we have these things like, it feels a little bit rote. I do think this movie does a really good job in consistently having the characters talk about things that are referencing the theme in ways that feel very natural. I really liked the scene in which Millie talks to Jamie at his house
Oh yes. Well, we should
about
talk about that. Yeah.
the problems in the relationship, and she's just come off of them having a fight and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And in any other movie, like I think maybe back to like the first Smile or something. I remember a movie that we definitely had issues like it feeling heavy-handed thematically. In
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
other movie, this would be like the scene where like we're sitting down, we're like, all right, guys, making sure you know that this is the theme of the movie. But because it's been established so well and the performances are so good, I didn't feel like it was heavy-handed. It felt like a
Yeah, no.
natural extension of the
Yeah.
not annoying, but like frustrating scenario that these characters are put in.
So let me talk about Jamie. So it's enough thematic talk. We got it.
Blah
We know
blah
what the movie's
blah.
about, and we'll come back around to it at the end of the movie, of course. So let's talk about like the real like words on the page. Like, all right, this is what's going on in this movie.
Yeah,
And it is this. So spoilers for the rest of the movie. We whatever.
we already done it.
Jamie is like a priest essentially of this cult that formed around the chapel that we see sunk into the ground, where you go through the ceremony with somebody that you love and you form into one person.
Yeah.
um so I will say that, yeah, as far as the reveal of Jamie as like someone who is involved with this, a larger character who is has more going on than we initially know. As someone who's seen movies, no, not humble brag. As soon as that guy was in a second scene and is like, "Hey, I live near you guys," I was like, "Okay, what's this guy's deal?
Yeah,
Let me know what this guy's deal is. He's got a deal going
Yeah,
on."
but he's also
And
the
then
only other like character in the movie.
Exactly. But I was like, first scene in the teacher's lounge, I was like, okay, this could be a one scene guy. We'll see. But then Allison Brie shows up at his house and rings the bell. I was like, okay, I see what's going
No,
on.
he comes over and has
All
dinner.
right.
Second.
Oh, well, yeah, sorry. But eventually she goes over to his house and like they don't show you ringing the bell, show her ringing the bell, but you hear it, and I was like, okay, well this guy's
I
like
didn't
part of
realize
the
that.
thing.
I thought it just
Yeah,
sounded
yeah, yeah.
like a
Oh
doorbell.
well, hey, you know what? Then my apologies. You know, maybe, but I was like, well, it's obviously a bell that she just
Sure,
rang,
yeah, fair enough.
like from the fucking thing.
Well,
Because then they
you're
show
right.
it to you later. Yes. And I was like, okay, well, he's got something to do with like this weird new age cult thing that he was talking about a little earlier in the movie. And then Alison Brie like watches the VHS tape, and then he's like hiding in the background, which is
Yeah.
pretty fun when he reveals that. And then you get the little thing of like she hits him, and he sort of like diffuses for a second because he is like the combination of two people
Yeah.
that you see in the VHS tape. And at the same time, Dave Franco goes back down into the cave, and he sees like a failed fusion of the missing couple that is being seeded earlier in
Yeah.
the film as well. And then everybody is like, okay, we understand the premise, and then we come back together. Like that, all that stuff happens fairly quickly,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm not too concerned with this film being like over explaining and having
Yeah.
a little bit of lore behind it,
Mhm.
because it's like, okay, it happens in about 5 minutes,
It's very
just to
fast, yeah.
catch anybody up who's maybe lagging behind a little bit, and then it's like, all right, now back to the actual meat of these two characters, like realizing what's happening. What's at the climax of the movie? What is the decision going to be? Are they going to Is one of them going to decide to make the sacrifice and kill themselves so the other one can live on, or the alternative? And here's what I think is really interesting:
Yeah.
is that this film sort of does a have your cake and eat it too
Oh, sure.
sort of solution
Yeah,
to
yeah.
that, where it's like you have the emotional catharsis of, okay, Allison Brie is going to kill herself. You know, she is maybe perhaps the more self-actualized character, if we're going to keep using that word as we understand it in the film, but she is going to make the sacrifice, kill herself so Dave Franco can live on without this. But also, and I think it's okay because it ties into his whole deal of like needing her more than she needs him.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, I can't live without you. Actually, we're going to do this, and she is okay with that. That he has made the decision for them to fuse together. Like she is not horrified that is the decision that he makes. I think it's a really interesting thing that this movie posits that like. I'll also just ask this. I'll pose the question to you.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you,
Yes.
Tucker. Is this like a happy ending? Is it a sad ending? Is it somewhere in between? What do you make of the ending of this, and like where our characters end up, and like what the movie is sort of bringing about in its final scene here?
Yeah, I think for the characters it's a happy ending because as you mentioned, Dave Franco makes this decision. He can't live without her. He's not a fully realized person. But I think ultimately, even though she is a more fully formed person in terms of her own identity,
Mm-hmm.
she also is someone that is is very clingy and does need someone else in her life because she doesn't know what to do otherwise.
Hmm.
She needs someone to take care of, to watch over. And so
Yeah.
in the moment when
And more than anything, she wants him to commit, to like
exactly, yes.
make a decision. Yeah.
And ultimately you can read into her character that she just needs someone else in her life. She needs to feel like someone is there for her, that she is there for
Hmm.
someone. And so when uh, Dave Franco makes a decision, she accepts it. What the hell's happening? And then she ultimately like gives into it. I think that for her, it's more of like because she's been trying to take the relationship to the next step across the course of the movie, and
Hmm.
ostensibly what he does when he makes the decision to save her life and then for them to fuse together is commitment, is
Hmm.
proposal, is
Yeah.
marriage, like. And so that's really what she's been wanting, is intimacy, is commitment. And
Yes.
he has proposed the ultimate intimacy, the ultimate commitment, and so
But
she's
here's my
kind
thing.
of like
But
happy about it.
yeah. But then I just think it's so interesting how that sort of, I guess, is in conflict with the relationship advice that the film is sort of premised on for
Yeah,
most of
yeah.
its runtime, which is the self-actualization. Like you have to be comfortable in your own bodies, in your own lives, and everything like that to have a healthy relationship. But this metaphor seems to be quite the opposite. Is that like if you are both unrealized, people, people who are missing
Yeah.
something in their lives, people who lack something, then this fusion, this permanent fusion, is the solution for that. I just think it's really
Yeah.
quite
No,
interesting.
yeah, you're right.
Um,
It's a little bit thematically
which I'm not saying.
confusing. It,
I'm not saying that that's like necessarily wrong because it's relationship advice. It's like, yeah, if you both need something, then that symbiosis, it
yeah.
can be freeing, which is literally like
Well,
the
not freeing,
metaphor for the end of the movie.
supporting, like that.
No, but like the thing about Jamie though is he says like this is true. This is the ultimate
Oh, yeah,
in relationship. It is a
yeah,
freedom from being like tortured as two souls. You can finally be one, and like the ultimate intimacy, like you were just
yeah.
talking about.
The reason why I think that the movie doesn't necessarily present that as a positive thing, um, is because it's not possible. Like, if this movie is about relationship advice and the movie ends on the
Sure,
fact that the two of them give up all sense of their individual identity to
individuality.
become
Yeah, yeah.
literally one, that is something that cannot happen in real life. And so I think it's mostly posing it as a, if if it were possible to totally get rid of your own identities, then maybe
Uh-huh.
you could find some sort of peace with that. But ultimately, that's it's
Yeah,
unreal,
I think that
it's supernatural,
it's also.
unscientific. So like, what you need to do is actually force yourself apart at a certain point.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think that's what we've settled on is that the film is ultimately saying like these are two people who have things to work out, but they rush into a relationship, a bit of a hasty decision spurred on by one of them, into something that they think they both want, but is ultimately an existential nightmare
Correct.
in the world of the film,
Yeah.
because that's what I was thinking about as I was walking out of the theater. The what would you do kind of thing was like, how does it? I think the film also invites that in its grounded sort of nature, in its
Yeah.
grounded storytelling, in grounding itself in an explanation, in also the problem solving, real world solutions, things like that. Having a few rules laid out about the premise, it invites you to think like, God, what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that even mean to become one person? You have a shared consciousness. What is that even like? Anything like that? Like, and then like the failed fusion that you see, like one of them has killed themselves in the midst of this transfusion. But but the other one is still alive, so it's like literally attached to this something that is dead. But it didn't kill both of them because they weren't fully fused yet.
Yeah.
Like I think there's just a lot of existential questions that can be raised about this movie that is ultimately about like being if you're ready to get married.
True, true, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I just think it's got a lot of interesting themes to talk about, and it
Yeah.
covers unique ground, and it's just really well done. Like, I walked out of this movie, I'm like, I don't think I have any major complaints about it. As someone who
Mhm.
is interested in horror movies with a compelling backstory and lore, the movie delivers that in those last
Mhm.
section. It's, as someone who really likes a unique premise, the movie definitely has that. Unless there's a guy out there who wrote a script that no one's seen.
Well, yeah. I also want to touch. Actually, you finish your point, and I'll put a button on that, and we can end the video.
My
Sorry.
point
Go
is,
ahead.
on
Yeah.
every level, I think this movie delivers what I'm looking for in a modern horror movie: is unique premise, very well executed, good performances, very well made in terms of the cinematography and the lighting and the color grading and all of that, and very focused, very tight. There's not a ton of extra things going on. It's focused on its one point and its themes, and everything then supports that. I think that this is one of my favorite movies of the year, just because
Mm.
it delivers on its unique premise very, very, very well.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I just absolutely loved it.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is just the humor sort of thing. Because this is a couple months ago, because this film premiered at like a Sundance Midnight
Yeah.
Festival or something like that early on in the year, and then there was this whole thing of like this guy comes out, he's like, they stole my idea for this script. I had the exact same idea. I was like, I already mentioned is like. Yeah, if you think about it a little bit, like you can come to this idea of symbiosis in relationship by way of body
Yeah, yeah,
horror.
yeah.
But then he also says, and in my script, they also play the Spice Girls song at
There's
the
no
end of the
way.
movie. But apparently that is true.
Oh, okay,
He
okay.
says like in my script, like, the exact same song plays. I was like, well, that's interesting. Like, because I just heard that he's like, oh, they use the same Spice Girls song. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's interesting, I
Then you hear
guess.
the
But
lyrics of
then
the
you hear,
song.
he's like, if you are a person of a certain age, if you're in your 30s, 40s, or whatever, and you grew up with the Spice Girls, you might pick the ironic needle drop that is their song that says "When two become one."
Yes.
I was like, okay, that's not exactly a unique idea unto itself either, is it?
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
like you're the only one who could come up with that conceivably.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, Tucker, I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10.
I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10.
Wow,
Whoa,
wow,
whoa! We obviously both highly recommend it. Very good movie, totally
yeah,
unique, and I hope people glom onto it. I hope people get stuck to it. I hope people fuse with it. You know what I'm saying?
uh-huh.
Uh,
I
and,
hope so too.
and also stay in a toxic relationship. You know, I mean, ultimately, that's really like the advice of this movie.
That's the lesson of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and don't leave your partner if you're having issues.
That's right.
Yeah, ever.
And also, if you can, bring power tools into the situation anytime you can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. See you next time.